This is the great irony, John Heilman. A lot of these people that John Meacham and I are talking about, whose names we can't say, but who everybody knows who they are. It's pretty simple to. A lot of these people, I guess I could say some of their names. I just don't want to waste my time.
Oh, come on, Joe. Go ahead.
A lot of these, the former governor of New Hampshire, Sununu, screaming at me one day for having Donald Trump on television and screaming at me the next day for being insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. There's one name. I could name 1,000 of them. Just so people that are watching here that are conservatives like me, don't think, oh, Joe's become a Marxist. Here's what's so amazing about that delta. That delta is occupied by the same people who said I was too conservative on balancing the budget. I was too conservative on immigration. I was too conservative on trade. I was too conservative. You fill in the blanks. Jenny Thomas thought I was a troublemaker when she worked for Dick Armey. Newt Gingrich said I was too conservative. Look it up, to ever get elected in 1994. He and other people in this delta were the people who called us the jihadists for insisting that we fight harder to balance the budget. Am I boring you, John?
No, I'm just making some notes about things I'd like to reply to. Yeah.
Continue making your notes. So you understand how rich this must be for me? That these same people who kicked the hell out of me when I was in Congress for being too conservative are now the ones who are upset because people aren't blindly lining up behind Donald Trump. And I guess the point is that delta is occupied by party hacks. It's not occupied by conservatives. It's not occupied by small government Republicans. It's not occupied by people who believe, like we believed when we came in and balanced the budget 4 years in a row for the first time in a century. Right. It's occupied by the party hacks who attacked us constantly for trying to push legislation even more conservative than theirs. So how fascinating that now they're defenders of conservatism and the great republic because they're defending a guy who wants to be an autocrat. It's all, as Sid and the Clowns would say, as Judy Collins would sing, isn't it rich? Isn't it rich?
Yeah. All right. So first of all, at the first pass, the delta might seem as though it's occupied just by people who don't like you. That's one possibility. I wanted to entertain that.
Hacks. You know when they would like me? They would like me if I would have been a party hack. If they could come to me during the whip votes and say, Joe, vote for this. And I go, I'm going to vote for what I believe in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I merely wanted to entertain that possibility for a moment to then move on to the next point, which is I've never found myself in agreement with Jenny Thomas before about anything, but the notion that she considers you a troublemaker seems like on at least one moment she had a little insight into your character. But I'd say the more important thing about your delta, Joe, is that it's occupied not just by party hacks. It's occupied by a collection of people who make up the core of the Republican Party's elected political class, let's call it that. And what they have shown over the last, 7 years is that they are either sort of whores to power, that power matters more than anything, matters more than principle, it matters. This whole thing about conservatism, policy, all of that stuff doesn't matter. They just care about power. Donald Trump had it. They were willing to do anything to be close to it, to keep it, to be parasites on it, all of that. Or if they're not whores to power, these are two not mutually exclusive categories, but whores to power and the fearful, the kind of the pathetically fearful who look at the Republican base and see their loyalty to Donald Trump and say, I'm afraid of my own shadow. I'm afraid of the base. I'm afraid if I take Trump on in the cause of principle that I'll be eaten alive by the base of the Republican Party. I will lose my job. I'll face the worst possible thing I could imagine. I have to go earn a living in the private sector.
Can I add one more, John Heilman, really quickly? They're grifters, too. A lot of these people.
Grifters.
Again, it's all about how much money can they raise, how many hits can they get. If Newt Gingrich says something outrageous like let's defund Jack Smith, and go to Newt.whatever and give me money. I mean, there's so much grifting going on here. It really is the Jim and Tammy Faye Bakerization of the Republican Party. So
we have the three categories then: the whores to power, the sluts for money, and the pathetically fearful. And what that all adds up to is a thing that you used to fight me about not that long ago when I would say, Joe, I'm afraid to say your party has become ideologically and intellectually and morally bankrupt. And you, for a number of years, would say, no, really, the party will find its way back. And now I feel like where we are is that much of the Republican Party has demonstrated, again, the political class of it, the base of it, it has a different set of problems, but I think the political class of it has just shown itself to be all the things that you've been saying, that John Meacham's pointing to. It is a giant test for the country and what used to be the Republican Party. I don't even know what that is anymore. It is the collection that we just talked about, and it's staggering that a party that we all considered problematic in some respects, but that we thought of as a serious political party less than a decade ago, is what it is now, which is, a whorehouse.
And just one example of Republicans degrading themselves by blindly following Donald Trump. Let's remember, of course, Rudy Giuliani was once a U.S. attorney in New York City who made a name for himself by using RICO statutes to take down mafia families. Now Rudy Giuliani is a defendant on RICO charges because he followed Donald Trump. Dave Aronberg, the indictment out of Georgia has about a dozen references to Donald Trump's tweets. We know, of course, he's still getting in trouble with his social media posts, protective order out of federal court. So two-parter for you. Do you think that, A, we could see a similar protective order come out of Georgia? I mean, he has been on the assault on Truth Social and all cap screeds against Fani Willis and the rest. And do you think at this point, because of these posts, do you think that there's a chance where he could suffer some real consequences for them, either in the state or federal level?
I think he already did, Jonathan, because I think the reason why you saw an expedited indictment last night, remember, we expected it to happen today, was because of Donald Trump's social media messages attacking the former lieutenant governor of Georgia. So that worked against him. And yeah, protective order, I think, is imminent because that's common in these kinds of cases. I'm waiting to see if there's going to be a partial gag order because Donald Trump can't comply with one. And if he gets ordered to stay silent, he'll violate that. And that may be the quickest way that he ends up in an orange jumpsuit.
Dave Aronberg, John Heilman, and John Meacham. Thank you all very much for being on this morning. What a day. And still ahead on Morning Joe, as Joe just mentioned, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich calls on Republicans to cut off the funding for special counsel Jack Smith's office. We'll show you those new remarks, plus much more in-depth legal analysis in the wake of Donald Trump's fourth indictment. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.